right, guys, it's on. The light is blinking.
Hello, Ketogains.
So you've got everybody and their brother. If there's somebody smart and ketogenic, they're probably sitting to the left of me. We are, as you can see, at the launch party officially for the Lucid product, right?
Yeah.
Right, at the wrap-up of FitCon. I got the Keto Academics logo up here, Pure Nutrition Utah. Before we get going too crazy, Craig, talk about Pure Nutrition because we haven't given it much press yet, but it's food, right?
Yeah, so it's actually all keto meal prep.
That's awesome.
So we specialize in, we don't do carbs, we don't do any of that shit. We actually have really nice 2-gram net carb tortillas that taste amazing.
Literally the greatest thing I've ever eaten.
And that was what we sampled earlier, or some of what we sampled earlier, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So really cool, like a Mexican flavored pork, some chicken with a nice crumbled cheese on it.
Tons of fat.
Awesome.
Tons of fat.
Yeah.
Yes. You have the official Mexican seal of approval and the Ketogains seal of approval, so it's all good, right?
Thumbs up.
Both of my partners are Mexican, so I take no credit for that.
There you go. There you go. Because when I think Preisendorf, I immediately think Latino heritage. I'm just going to go ahead and say, oh, it's radical.
Right? That's actually, it's in French. Yeah, super. I'm just a big.
There you go. The cheese eating surrender monkey as was it Homer Simpson called him one time. Cool. So just wanted to get all of us together really quickly and chat about some stuff that's going on in the industry, stuff that might really be cool. I know, we were talking and you guys gave great presentations on topics about supplements in general, about glycogen, about ketogenic diet, some of the research that's being done. So I think probably we can start with the studies that you guys are doing, but before we do, you guys want to talk about the institute a little bit here? Are we able to do that? Definitely.
All right, cool. So one of the things is this, like, we want to study, our whole mission, our why is to change the course of nutrition science, really forever. And what do we mean by that? Usually when you do research, it takes forever to get to you guys. And so we literally want to do research and take it directly to you immediately, without the in-between. And so we stepped out actually and developed our own 21,000 square foot facility where we can team up from the guys from Ketogains, we can team up with Craig Preisendorf, we can team up with Sean Wells, the world's greatest formulator, and basically talk about, do research all the time. So we're literally doing ketogenic research 24/7, and we'll have the Ketogains out soon to the facility. We're actually talking about possibly doing a conference up there, and bringing you into the lab.
Everybody gets a muscle biopsy though, so don't get too excited. Core sample, baby. It's a requirement. That and the 23+Me genomic test before we get. There you go. 23andMe genomic test as we go in, right? Cool. So definitely glad. Thank you guys, and Craig, thank you for putting this on and having us out. Thanks for coming out. Seriously,
should we say who everyone is?
Absolutely. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. So
Craig chose this song.
It's my favorite.
That's all right. We know that the guys know 17 by ABBA, so we heard that earlier. So Luis, if you want to start and introduce yourself, we'll go around the room.
Okay, yeah, well, you know probably who I am. I'm Luis Villaseñor from Ketogains.
I'm Ryan Lowry, the Applied Science and Performance Institute, surrounded by my heroes here, so I'm excited to be here.
Very understated for one of the most brilliant people I know. And he already has over 100 published papers. For a very young person, like someone who's like 80, that would be incredible. But Ryan isn't even 30 yet, so it's ridiculous. I'm a formulator.
The world's greatest.
Thank you.
We'll say that.
It's actually stated. Yeah. I actually went to the website, and be honest, the guy you do have that. Oh, that's awesome.
I have to explode about the world's greatest formulator on my website. My website
approved.
Yeah, it's Zone Halo Research.
Yeah,
it's my company, and I also I was director of R&D at Dymatize, and now I'm Chief Science Officer at BioTrust, but I also am CEO of Zone Halo Research. So
I'm Craig Preisendorf. I'm a serial entrepreneur with anything keto and badassery. I mean,
it's true.
FitCon, Lucid, Pure Nutrition. We're rolling out the stops. Like, this literally was the transition of like the full keto force with everyone here involved with the seminar series that went on with Ketogains here. It was like all the powers unite under one roof to realize that we can push this out to the masses, and it's correctly pushed out to the masses. That's what we really want to do. I mean, that's what this is all about. So thanks for having us on this and letting us push it out even further. You got 10,000 members, something like that now?
Almost right at 20,000 on Facebook group. About 60, getting close to 60,000 on Reddit. Website gets about 70,000 hits a month, give or take right now, and growing every day. So
Yeah, seriously.
definitely. So yeah, let's keep it pretty rolling.
And so my name's Jacob Wilson, again, like with Brian Lowry, work with him at Applied Science and Performance Institute. And again, our whole mission is to bridge the gap between science and application, to find new ways so that you can reach your goals. And, our other thing is the Muscle PhD. So on the Muscle PhD, we have a Muscle PhD Academy. We talk a lot about ketogenic dieting, exogenous ketone, every different type of ketogenic aspect you can sort of think of. And then we do research on it all day long. I mean, literally, we live, breathe, eat, sleep. We dedicate our whole lives really to this topic, and to working with guys like everyone here on trying to move the field forward.
Definitely was going to say too, for those of you that haven't seen it, go find it and watch it. The series you guys did on the different types of fibers, specifically, and how they're not all so fibery, like FOS and ISO or other. You start looking at those things, and yeah, they do break down, and at some point there's probably a little bit of sugar that comes from those. And so being cognizant of that and looking at like sugar alcohols and things like that are definitely important. So go watch those if you haven't, for real, and like and Facebook and whatever. I don't do technology and social media, so whatever you're supposed to do with these people, do it with these people. Tyler Cartwright, I am the benevolent internet troll. I ask a lot of questions that you can't answer very easily because it's fun. You guys know me, Ketogains, ketogenic dieters, keto science on Reddit, Facebook, all those places. So, and if you don't know me, now you know. I sound like a rapper.
If you don't know, now you know.
Yes.
a little Biggie Smalls.
Yeah, it's exactly what you need after 2 days of running around like a chicken with her heads cut off here. But cool. So one of the things I wanted to jump into, and Sean, I think you hit the nail on the head in your talk about really trying to dive into the idea that supplements don't work, right? And sometimes we get into the same thing with science, right? People will say, well, in a lab, it's kind of like the spherical vacuum or whatever that terrible physics joke is, So I wanted to kind of open the forum and start with supplements in general, but I want to kind of transition into the broader conversation of in vivo and what we do in paper, limitations of rodent studies, canine studies, those sorts of things. But let's jump in and kind of, I know you gave some of the talk in the presentation, and I don't want to steal that thunder, but when people say that sort of thing, supplements don't work, what's wrong with that message, or what contextually needs to be corrected there?
Well, it's like saying drugs don't work. I mean, obviously, like, supplements, obviously we know supplements work. We talked about creatine, there's like 500 plus studies, it works. And a lot of drugs are taken from supplements. These extracts, like digitalis, for example. There's so many aspirin, like salicylic acid from white willow bark. There's so many things that the drug world has taken from supplements. So you can't tell me that supplements don't work. And they've been working for thousands of years. That's been the form of drugs for thousands of years, all these herbs and different things. So obviously they work. That said, there's a lot of bad supplements out there. There's so many companies that are just trying to profit. I got into that in my discussion that I had next to Craig. And there's so many reasons that you can have bad supplements. There's unscrupulous testing. There's something called dry labbing, where you can basically send your product off, and a company that doesn't even have testing equipment will send you results. Just typing it up on a laptop, here's your results, you passed. And so you're passing that way. There's ways that you can test an herb, like I gave an example of a fucoxanthin, from algae, which has been tested for fat loss, testosterone, and a 5% fucoxanthin extract that's UV tested is $40 a kilo. A 5% fucoxanthin extract from that's tested by HPLC is $5,000 a kilo. So, which do you think they're going to put in their product? I mean, unless they're just really scrupulous, and then maybe they're putting it in their product. They use the $5,000 one, but people are like, that's too expensive. I don't want to buy that. So, part of the fault is these companies that are cashing in.
Sure.
And, they'll just use what's cheapest. They're not testing. They're not putting in overages. The manufacturer isn't testing. The manufacturer isn't putting in overages. They sometimes have heavy metals and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's so frustrating, all the things that are going on. But, people at the same time aren't willing to spend the money on the supplements. Really expensive supplements. Craig came out with this incredible supplement right here. And it's an expensive supplement, but it's loaded with expensive ingredients. And it tastes good. And it has, the right manufacturing processes and all these ingredients test out. That's expensive. So it's frustrating, and that product works unbelievably. And, I've tested products out, like I mentioned in my talk, that, where I had all the right ingredients. And one not even that long ago that, the ingredients in it were unbelievable. Each were dosed correctly, the highest, quality ingredient. Put them all together, and, maybe you don't get the best results. These guys, prove that out with their research, and they're willing to do research that isn't unscrupulous. That's another part of this too. There's a lot of places that'll do kind of fake studies. Well, what do you want? Well, here you go. Here's your study. And unfortunately, that happens. These guys can speak to that as well. There's a lot of places out there. You hand them $100,000, you can get the study results you want.
So yeah, to that end, and I definitely want to jump into this too. So when we look at like this supplement side of things, where does that transition into humans? Because something that theoretically ought to work maybe doesn't work so well, or in the clinical applications where you're actually, here, try this. What's the result? Either in rodents and humans, this word of mouth feedback from the product. Do you run into situations where it should work and it just doesn't for whatever reason? That it just kind of falls flat. It's got the right products, the right mix, and there's something we don't know yet that's limiting that. And I guess I'm leaning towards like biohackers in specific.
Right.
It's guys who say, well, I'm taking this for this and this for this, and it's a little bit like Alice and the White Rabbit, right? One pill makes you large, the other makes you small, and so you wind up right back where you were. Because what's good about this is deleterious or whatever when you're taking this other supplement. So, I mean, do you see that sometimes in a lab or in studies where it ought to work? It sounds like it ought to work, and there's just something that doesn't.
Well, for one, the placebo effect's powerful in and of itself. For two, I mean, how often do drugs not work? And that you have to take other drugs. Like you get on Lasix and you need to take potassium. I worked in nursing homes as well as hospitals, and especially with my nursing home patients, and they'd have what's like a 10-page MAR, so the medical record. And so this is literally like, we're talking about between 70 and 100 pills. Different drugs, and the nurse would be popping, and it's insane. And sometimes, like the family would say, they're late stage, let's take them off everything, and then they'd rally. And it's like, yeah, because they're taking off there's so many drugs, and they're scared to take them off these other drugs, because then they all have responsibility. But there's so many drugs that are given because of all the side effects from the other drugs. And just like I said before, supplements can be as powerful as drugs. So it happens with supplements too, that you can be taking the wrong combination of supplements, and I certainly see it in a lot of products. I'm like, why is that in there and this? That doesn't make sense. These are counterproductive, and it absolutely happens. And then sometimes you just stumble into it, like that. We're looking sometimes at like just like a drug. You look very myopically sometimes with just, okay, it inhibits this enzyme. But the body, like in its homeostatic glory, will, okay, now we'll bypass that mechanism. And so there's something else that happens downstream. And so you can't just say, oh, we're living in a vacuum and it's inhibiting this one enzyme. Well, what happens as a result of that? And then there's all these other compounds that are in that herb that sometimes can be synergistic, but maybe we're like trying to get to 98% purity, like a drug, of this one active compound. But whereas if you were to take the herb, there's all these different compounds in there that might work synergistically to do something different.
And I think
It's very interesting.
like you said, I think the fiber thing that we were talking about earlier is a perfect example of that. You take in vitro data in a dish, and you take some of these fibers, and they're not getting broken down. What we found in humans is that there's certain enzymes in, say, like the brush border of the human digestive tract that actually breaks down some of these fibers. So yeah, you won't see that in a cell culture, but you'll see that in the human, and that has a drastic impact on some of these bars and different fibers that we're seeing in the market.
And I would think it's almost like a long-range effect. So if you're testing with a glucometer, you're not going to see, oh, my blood sugar spiked when I took this fiber. But if you were to keep testing, or you did some sort of tracer study or something, you would see that there's some percentage of that is happening. And I think placebo is definitely an interesting thought process on there. And definitely want to get there. But do you guys see this as trainers? The guy who comes in looking for the perfect supplement, so you find out that they're taking like 37 pills a day, of different, and I know we've talked about this with a couple of clients and, doing some consults back and forth on, why would they be taking this with this, right, you and I? And, I was just curious if you guys see that too, where it seems like, this makes me perform so much better, and there's absolutely no clinical evidence that product does anything.
I mean, we're leading to like raspberry ketones and Dark City and Cambodia and all that stuff, right? Because I mean, I worked at a GNC and a vitamin shop for a long time. He did back in the day. And so you see people literally coming in for Band-Aids, like raspberry ketones. And I mean, lose fat because I saw it on Dr. Oz, and you're like, you're so far off. And then they're stacking with all the other stuff you recommended, and who knows what that's doing.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is everybody's looking for that. And I was saying everybody, but it seems like those types of people seem to be looking for the pill-based solution to all of life's problems. When in reality, it's just shut up and do hard work. I mean, honestly.
And we get that in the MLM industry here too. They get this big, huge hype up of like, well, Tahitian Noni and Zango. Like, all you gotta do is take this juice and it's gonna solve all your problems from cancer all the way to you being a dick. You know what I mean? So that's what ends up, and they all pump it up, and then they all pull it out, and it's just like, oh my gosh, it's just so much bullshit.
And that's the interesting thing about like placebo, right? Or even nocebo effect from a training perspective. You tell somebody, oh, if you keep squatting that way, you're going to get injured, and then all of a sudden, magically, they come in with a bandage on their knee, and oh, my knee's been bothering. It's funny how you can the mind is so convinced of what it believes before, and it's almost like it has a cognitive bias.
People say placebo effect like it's so bad.
No, not at all.
But I think like if anything, it shows me that like we don't necessarily. I'm saying this as a formulator. Maybe you almost don't need the supplements. You don't need the drugs. If you could really tap into your mind that well and harness, like, instead of like looking at it, oh, that's such a negative that people can make themselves believe.
This is an awesome supplement. Maybe we don't need supplements.
I agree with you.
No, but
I totally agree.
People I do love supplements, obviously. I use them all day, every day. But I'm just saying, like, placebo, like, it gets just such, like, a negative rep. And if anything, it's saying there's such power in the mind. I mean, everyone's now talking about, like, mindfulness and, like, how you can activate, muscle fibers, like focus on that activation before you actually do the lift. It's easy, like, but people can cure themselves. I mean, like, it's incredible what you can do with the mind.
Some meditation has actually been shown to improve gray matter prep. And you see those guys out in Asia sticking swords in their throat and dropping on it. And there's not a supplement in the world that's going to help with it. Right? And So I mean, that's when you look at those extremes. You're like, those guys aren't on supplements. They're probably eating very, very like strenuously in a sense, and they're doing those amazing things because all they're doing is focusing on those things. Like, when do we ever actually solely focus on one thing?
Right.
Never.
You're getting all this information and trying to
Always. Like, whether you're just sitting here talking to us, we just have so much going around. There's no way we can focus completely here and now.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I definitely think that's where some of the nootropic interest is coming from. Is how do I calm my mind if I'm anxious? How do I get focused back if I'm being pulled 1,000 directions? What am I capable of doing if I'm clear focus, clear mind? And is there a way to supplement that in such a way to do almost superhuman feats? Sorry to do the superhero thing there, but no, definitely. So to one of the studies, definitely wanted to jump in. Ryan got a chance to actually read the paper on your recently published research study, you guys both. But definitely, if you can kind of walk through the folks that maybe fell asleep while reading it and drooled a little bit because they're not so much interested in the science of it, kind of boil it down to maybe like 30 seconds or a minute of what this study indicates. I mean, I think if like an indicating study is what we would do.
Hyped up version.
That's it.
Yeah.
So we have 2 studies coming out. 2 studies. I'll talk about the first one. I'll let Doc talk about the most recent one. We have our study coming out on resistance training athletes. It's going to be published very soon here. Basically, we took resistance trained guys, like high level resistance trained guys, not just like your average Joe, like really well trained guys. Put them either on a ketogenic diet or a Western diet, and we actually saw you can gain significant amount of lean mass and lose body fat on a ketogenic diet. Their strength continued to increase. We actually saw slight elevations in things like testosterone, no adverse events in things like cholesterol, triglycerides, or anything like that. So it's really the first study ever done in high-level resistance training athletes in humans. So once we did that study, we decided to do a follow-up with our colleagues, Dr. Mike Roberts, and I'll let Doc speak to that study that just got published.
Yeah, and also I want to say to you too, because like as scientists, Ryan and I always make hypotheses before we do studies.
It's part of the scientific process. You have to, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, here's the thing, okay? We're humans, so we get biased by all the hype too. And everyone was saying, you can't gain as much muscle unless you're on carbs. You can't gain as much muscle unless you're on carbs. So it's like a mantra. You can hear this over and over again. So I'm brainwashed by this. In my mind, I said, maybe you can't gain as much muscle if you're not on carbs. So I actually predicted that they would not gain as much muscle on keto. And guess what? I was wrong. And that's the whole point, and that's the coolest part about science. Like, you look, boom, these guys freaking gained muscle and they lost fat too. Our second study that we did, we looked at protein synthesis. We looked at molecular signaling pathways. And without carbs, they were stimulating as much protein synthesis as when they were on carbs. Which was fascinating. But here's the coolest part. This is, I think, the most fascinating part, okay? Everyone, who's on keto is like, oh, I need to carb up on the weekends. I still need to have a whole bunch of carbs because I'm glycogen depleted. So if I do a cyclic diet, I can have the best of both worlds. Guess what we found? Going pure keto, you can have the best of both worlds. We found no significant difference between glycogen levels with resistance training, on keto, and with carbs. And Ryan, you hit him with the Bolick study on the fat shake.
So Bolick just published a recent study as well. He saw the same exact, so we saw that in an animal model. He saw the same exact thing in a human model. And basically, he looked at rates of glycogen resynthesis following an intense endurance bout. Again, high-level athletes, like some of the best endurance runners in the world he had in his study. And he saw the same rates of glycogen resynthesis following this endurance bout in both those who are on a ketogenic diet and those who are on a high carbohydrate-based diet, regardless.
So let's talk about that process, because there's a lot of, I think, confusion around what happens when we strength train or resistance train, right? So you're going to burn essentially, so for all intents and purposes, the glycogen that's in a muscle cell is trapped inside of that cell. And so when you're doing some sort of resistance exercise and you move kind of past, some of the BCA, metabolites and stuff that we can do from ketones, you're going to burn that glycogen, right? So you're doing heavy training days. You're eventually going to deplete's probably a harsh word, but you may get close if you're killing it. The hypothesis has always been that I need to carb up because that muscle cell, there's not enough circulating glucose. There's all this glucose sparing that's happening for the brain and the and the different tissues and cells that don't have the capabilities to utilize anything but glucose. So what the studies show, and let's just distill it down to stupid level, right? I mean, because I have moments definitely. Well, you're studying rodents, and I sound a little bit like I'm pandering or leading the witness, and I'm sorry, but you're studying rodents, and Bullock study and endurance is showing the same thing. The body finds a way, right? I mean, we'll go full Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park, but the body seems to find a way to get the glycogen back into cells. And I mean, biologically, it doesn't make sense, but I think it does make sense if you think about it evolutionarily. I mean, it would definitely be an advantage to have redundant pathways, because you never know when, the brontosaurus is going to chase you. And yes, I know people that are hardcore evolutionists, people and dinosaurs didn't exist, so don't write me letters because you will. I'll get that. It's cool. But no, I mean, so I think it's a really interesting set of studies, right? That say, yes, you can build muscle at the same or very similar rates, right? And from a recovery perspective, it's definitely, well, there's no statistically significant difference both in the rodent model and also, in the human model that's going to be published. I think what's interesting then, and just to carry this full scale to the training aspect and the client side of this thing is, so if recovery's fine and muscle development's fine, and you're not, so I'm saying like you're not getting the gains or the the development or the striving towards the goals that you want. Like, whose fault is that? What's the issue here? Because I mean, biochemically, there's nothing. It doesn't seem to be limiting you to any extent based on recent research anyway.
And some of the stuff that we're doing is driven by guys like here, by Luis and Craig. Basically, like Craig, for instance, we watched amazing MMA fights last night, and he had some of his fighters literally kicking ass in the ring. And
real quick, just to set a couple things straight, I had a world record set from one of they barely introduced the strongman professional. And so 9 months ago, Leslie Hawkins, we're going to get her on a cast too. Ketogains member. Yep, she's Ketogains member, absolutely. She hired a glucose-based coach and was getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And 9 months ago, she came to me and said, "What do I got to do?" After watching some videos with all of us, and then we switched her over to keto, and she has smashed. And she dropped a full weight class, has smashed all of her own personal records, and set multiple world records in keto. And she loves it because she doesn't feel inflamed, she doesn't get injured. She's actually injury-free for the first time in 9 months straight. And she competed in the last 3 weeks, week to week to week, in the most strenuous form of competition, being strong.
Hold on, Corey, I'll bring it right back.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, going back to your point, like you're saying, MMA fighters, high intense athletes are still putting out high intense with zero carb. And that's what needs to be really, really emphasized here, because the reliance on carbs is ridiculous.
Well, one thing I've always brought up is the animal kingdom. I love looking at that. And I mean, one, we're omnivores. We're meant to have this dual fuel. Like, I mean, I think if you think back evolutionarily, like, if we were like in the winter, what would we eat? Potentially before we got good at storing grains and things like that. It would have been hunting animals. Now maybe during the summer, maybe we're eating plants and berries and whatever. But obviously we have the ability to tap into either of these fuel sources. So I don't see them as like it's only. It seems like the world's been like only glucose, only glucose, only glucose, and it makes sense that we glycogen replete so that we can tap into either fuel source. It makes sense that we store a very efficient source of calories on us in adipose tissue. We can tap into that. It makes sense. I don't know why it's so confusing, why it's so weird. I mean, it's millions of years. Like, Why is that weird? And then tell me about how on keto you can't be fast. The cheetah's pretty fast, right? The cheetah's keto. It seems to be okay at running.
You see a cheetah eating carbs? I've never seen it. I've never seen a cheetah eating
I don't know,
carbs.
maybe he has a nice salad beforehand and you just don't see
and
it.
I'm not
Because
saying-
we're only interested in the main course.
And I'm not saying that, you know, things can't be fast on glucose like a hummingbird or, you know, whatever it is. Obviously it can be, but, you know, it's just why do we have to limit things and put them in a box? It's very interesting to me. If you look at our evolution or if you look at animals, there's a lot of interesting things to look at and we can step outside of the box.
But also think about this. Carbohydrates, you're talking about what, 2,000 calories in your whole body? Look at this. So we spend our whole freaking lives trying to fill up a 2,000 calorie tank.
You got 100,000 stored on you.
And talk about dual
On a
fuel.
lean person, 100,000 calories stored on you on a lean person. Like I think it's something like 12%, 10 to 12% body fat. It's 100,000.
Yeah, yeah. And think about this for a second. If you look at Bullock's data, you talk about dual fuel.
Yeah.
Bullock's data shows that when you're keto, you're using more fat. Yes, you still have ketones. But when you got to maximal intensity, you tap directly into glycogen. Oh, not eating carbs. So that means you can use both fuels. You're not limited when you're keto.
Right.
So let's talk about that too, because it does seem, you know, that definitely, Sean, I get the point. But one of the things that we see a lot, you know, message boards, forums are great places for people with unfounded opinions sometimes to have them. Myself included, I always try and caveat it with this is a complete hypothesis, but sometimes I get ahead of myself. You know, there seems to be like this reciprocal hatred that's come about where it's like, you know, oh, you pushed carb down me and I got fat, so now I hate you and insulin is the enemy and glucagon is my hero and sugar is all bad. I want to just, I mean, in front of God and everybody, the panel here, just to simply say, earn your carbs, I think is a fair statement to make here.
It's the one macronutrient that is not necessary. It's not essential, but it is a tool. We've all talked about it. It can be a tool. I love Earn Your Carbs, and I loved a friend of mine, Dr. Rob Wildman. I was over at his house, and you know, his little girl came in and said, "I'd like to have a cookie." He said, "Well, were you outside running, playing for the last hour?" And she said, "No." Well, you can't have the cookie. You know, so like earn your carbs, earn your carbs, and it's a great thing to teach children. It's like earn your carbs.
That's fair, yeah. You know, there's a place for a Gatorade. I mean, you know, but the thing is, the place for the Gatorade isn't because your kids like it and because LeBron brings it. It's because I just got through smashing a 2-hour workout and it tastes good and it's going to spike insulin and it's going to do a lot of things that, if it's something that works for you, that you're, you know, insulin sensitive enough or carb tolerant enough to deal with, definitely it's the case. And I do think it's individualized, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
some people are highly insulin sensitive.
Yeah, you know, people absolutely, you know, but for them, burning it is just a different height on the high jump, right? And, you know, the rim is a little bit higher, and you got to do a little bit more effort to put the ball in the basket. But it's the green monster, Mr. Baseball over here. But yeah, but I think it's an interesting thing that we see too. Is it's almost like this reciprocal hatred, but we don't need to be idiots. I mean, to be ketogenic isn't to like leave your mind at home or to suggest that there's not a place for both to exist.
I say that all the time on a radio show that Ryan and I do quite a bit. Is that you know, it doesn't have to be just one way. I think for some people that are highly insulin sensitive, you know, they can eat carbs, and you know, I encourage people to just eat whole food. You know, if someone eats vegan, great. If someone keto works for them, great. You know, whatever it is, like for you, like you don't have to put it in a box. There isn't just one way for one person. It's just that I think in our society, where we have decadent food at our disposal constantly, we're assaulted with things that you always want to eat. You can get addicted to sugar. We have too much calories. We have too little exercise. In those kind of scenarios, keto is going to work very well. Thousands of years ago, you know, if you were working all day, every day, if you're a CrossFitter or whatever, you know, if you're 10,000 calories you're burning a day, it probably doesn't matter what you're eating that much. But
the rear end of a cow, you're probably going to continue to lose weight, right?
if you're not exercising, I can tell you without a doubt the best way to maintain your body weight is going to be keto.
So let's talk a little bit, exogenous ketones. I know it's funny, I talk to the folks here and everybody's like, oh, you're the guy, right? I'm like, I want to be completely crystal clear here, everybody. Again, I have no problem with exogenous ketones. I actually use them as pre-workout.
We all use
Own it.
them.
Absolutely, you definitely. But the idea that they're going to somehow cause you to burn fat at a faster rate, isocalorically and ceteris paribus with respect to exercise and all of those things. But I do think it's interesting in light of the earn your carbs kind of a mantra to say they can be glucose sparing more so. So it would be interesting to say, okay, maybe I choose to take this drink or use this liquid or whatever as a means to not have or not choose to eat that cookie or whatever. Because I'll be honest, after almost a decade of this, or 15 years, when I crave, it's my steak. I mean, there are days when it's like, man, I'd love to eat some ice cream or something. But it is kind of an interesting thought to say, these supplements, again, have a place, but it's context driven, right? I don't think that for somebody that's sitting around doing absolutely nothing, they're going to chug this drink every day, and magically they're going to get slender, other than maybe the appetite suppressing aspects of it, and that's definitely the same thing. I would simply say there are probably some other supplements that do a very similar sort of a thing, with maybe a little lighter on the pocketbook. I don't know. Maybe the price of the product is coming down. I think the quality is improving as we get better formulations. Which I know you do some good work. Patrick's doing some good work in that industry and really trying to look at, can we make this stuff better? What can we do to kind of carry, what's the next iteration of this as an alternate fuel source or almost like a supplement, like a Gatorade for sports athletes that want to stay keto, right? So maybe prolong that point between glycogen depletion or whatever. So definitely, and I want to talk about this on two different facets too. Nitrogen spiking that you brought up in the conversation, because we get a lot of questions in the forum. What about this brand of protein? What do you think of this brand of protein? And it's not so much to say, hey Sean, tell us who sucks and who's good. It's, hey Sean, what should people look out for? I mean, from a protein perspective, and in general, what do we need to keep an eye out for? That might be a giveaway that it's a poor quality product. I think it's a good place to jump in and then maybe talk about, using whole food protein sources versus the idea of shakes or powders or tablets or whatever.
Okay. So with regarding protein, I mentioned Dr. Rob Wildman before. When I was at Nitrotize, we led the charge on nitrogen spiking, protein spiking, and basically what happens is there's the Keldol test, which is testing nitrogen, and so then you take a conversion factor and you take that nitrogen and convert it to what would be protein grams, and so now you can know the level of protein in your product. That can be manipulated by using things that are high nitrogen sources, but they're non-protein nitrogen. So that would be things like glycine, taurine, arginine, and then creatine. Now, why use those specific ones?
Dumb that down for a second. So not useless, but not really beneficial for muscle protein synthesis. Is that a fair?
For the most part, yeah, that's true. Maybe creatine a little indirectly does, but that's not even an amino acid, let alone a protein. So I like a lot of those ingredients. I just think that they should not be in your protein, so you can know that your protein's not spiked. So the problem is, what happens there is when those ingredients, you say, like those companies say, those are good ingredients and we're not spiking. Okay, maybe there's a small chance, but those ingredients just so happen to be about a quarter of the price of the whey protein. So that's probably why they're in there. And I would be very skeptical if they are in there. But the big problem, and Jake and Ryan can speak to this, is that you're not getting potentially enough leucine to trigger muscle protein synthesis. 25 grams of whey protein has 2.8 grams of leucine. just so happens 25 grams is a typical scoop of your whey. And just so happens that's a really good amount of leucine to trigger muscle protein synthesis. So what happens if you're getting protein that are 60% protein, that are 50% protein?
Keep talking.
And cut.
Keep talking. I'm ready. We're good. What the hell happened?
We'll come back. We'll come back.
Not bad, guys.
It's all good.
Shit. That was not supposed to happen.
There we are.
Go back.
Don't worry.
And
Good position, bad position. Where are we at?
You did say get the hell out at 8, and so you're throwing us up and tearing the table down now. So it is.
I'm just gonna kick everything over in a second.
well,
There we go. We're good. We're good.
we're coming back now.
Okay, here we go. All right. Good thing we got
That was,
editing.
that was
Jeremy,
probably
cut
traumatic
that.
for you, the viewer, more so than it was for us. So sorry if you got disoriented. But Jake, do you want to speak to, maybe not getting enough with that scoop?
That's a very interesting topic that nobody probably knows. Most of the athletes don't know the protein supplements. They're just looking at protein as a whole, right? And they don't know what actually leucine is one of the things.
Right, so you got your substrate, which is protein, but leucine is very key.
Leucine's like the trigger.
Yeah, just maybe down to like just what a leucine is. It's an amino acid.
Leucine's an amino acid. It's like the trigger to stimulate protein synthesis. So when your muscle sees, oh, leucine's high, it goes, okay, I got a lot of amino acid availability. I can adapt. I can grow. And so basically the trigger for that is over 2 grams of leucine. So anywhere from 2 to 3 grams of leucine. So like Sean pointed out, if you see 25 grams of protein, 50% of it spiked, you don't hit the trigger. And that's a scary thing, because you're like, oh, especially if you're dieting, you're only going to go with 1 scoop.
No, I'm in the back.
And now you're trying to trigger protein synthesis. And protein synthesis is very important for body, like not only muscle mass, but for increasing mitochondria in the muscle and making us leaner. My brother, Dr. Gabe Wilson, did research where he showed like if you don't hit the leucine threshold, even if you have the same amount of protein, you're fatter.
It's really an interesting conversation, yeah. And I mean, protein does so many other things. I mean, we always deal, I think, probably because of exercise backgrounds. Muscle protein synthesis. You've got immune function. You've got carrier proteins. You've got signaling proteins. You've got and there's some really important ones: insulin, glucagon. I mean, all of these things that sort of keep us alive are all protein based. Yeah. So it's a really interesting topic. So we deal a lot with like whey, right? Whey shakes, casein shakes, those sorts of things. So I wanted to start maybe with like whole food protein sources and maybe benefits and maybe some reasons to use shakes, because sometimes you see groups of people or trainers are like, oh, only whole food sources. There's a place, I think, for whey and casein and those types of things. But so maybe I guess we can jump in, talking about like steak or chicken or something. What sort of, I guess, amount would somebody need to eat of a, let's say a lean, like a chicken breast or something, to get close to that threshold? Anybody kind of got a speculative number? Because I really have a threshold on that.
It's going to vary on the protein source and how lean it would be. Like chicken would be very like lean protein. I think we're looking at probably 5, 6, 7 ounces like with protein synthesis.
Yeah. Put it in perspective, like whey can be up to like 11% leucine about. Egg is probably about as close to, and that's like 8.6, 9%. Whereas you have chicken and beef is around 7.5 to 8% leucine. Still all high quality.
Sure.
But obviously with the whey you might be 25 grams. With the chicken it might be 35 grams of chicken protein to hit that same threshold.
And whey, interestingly too, even if it goes solid, is a very, very fast digestible and absorbing protein as well. So timed around workouts, timed around high stress environment, times when muscle metabolism is going to be at a higher rate, is probably muscle repair is going to need to be done immediately. Having the faster source of ready amino acids seems to be beneficial, even if we set the leucine conversation kind of on a shelf.
Well, and there's
Right?
here there's a question that's probably gonna pop up is what about intermittent fasting?
Intermittent fasting, yeah. So intermittent fasting is really interesting. What I can say is that with the studies on intermittent fasting, when you condense the window, maybe eating 9 hours, it seems to move you into ketosis. And what happens with that, once you're actually into ketosis, you're sparing lean tissue, you're sparing catabolism during the fasting period. And so I think that's where basically it kind of changes the rules a little bit. You're not maybe anabolic during that time, but you're sparing muscle during that time.
Would a shake throw you out?
Would a shake throw you out of intermittent fasting? You've done research on that.
Also, what about, for example, there's a way to reconcile MPS with intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
Just with you probably referring, because let's say that you eat only 1 time a day. You get gains and also get the benefits from intermittent fasting. Or you just maintain.
What I would say is if you look at protein distribution studies, you likely won't optimize gains. Although I know different animal kingdom and stuff like that. I'm just saying, like, if you distribute protein, I'm not saying you need to eat 7 times a day, but probably more than once if you're trying to optimize muscle growth. I've experienced that personally. Yeah.
Maybe.
It depends on the animal and the animal kingdom.
Right. But we are animals too.
Yes.
And so I would say with research, are you looking at someone that went into that study that their whole life, for 20, 25 years, has ate 3 meals a day every day, and then they go into the study where they eat 1 meal a day, and then people make thoughts around that. What if that person was eating 1 meal a day and fasting, in the same fashion, intermittent fasting their entire life? The kinetics would be very different
like a
on protein.
homeostatic
All right,
sort
so
of.
let me say this. I'm going to go left field, okay? All right?
We're going to go left field
I'm
very
stepping
quickly.
out.
We have a minute and a half before they
All right,
throw
I'm
us out.
stepping out, and I'm going very, very theoretical, okay? On Sean's point. Because, listen, here's the thing.
Theoretical is where science happens first.
Okay.
You take your theories and test them.
What I'm going to say is that, like, just on paper, I'm going to say I think if you distribute protein out, you'll likely make more gains. However, to Sean's point, that's in people who eat more frequently. Okay, so train harder.
How does the lion eat?
I'm going to go to Sean's point. All right, so let's go on the theoretical base because look, even if this is my stance, I'm going to go, is there a theory behind what Sean's saying? Okay, here's a theory I see. One of our colleagues, he actually did a postdoc with us. He's really out there, but he did a postdoc with a smart guy. And his colleagues went out and they took gorillas, right? And they said, why are they so jacked? And so
I love, this is one of my favorite topics.
You see this?
Gorillas only eat
friend.
vegetarian.
Right? You see why this guy's my friend. Takes the gorilla's blood, okay? And basically looks and takes like protein, like muscle protein, puts the gorilla's blood on the muscle protein, and protein breakdown goes down big time. Like plummets, goes way down. Well, what happens when you're keto adapted? Ketones start to spare like amino acids from being oxidized. So we always look at the protein synthesis side of things. Maybe with intermittent fasting, you're changing it so where manipulation of protein breakdown becomes more dominant. Now, again, I'm throwing that out there. I'm not telling you Dr. Wilson said
We're going to become
throwing it out
gorillas, is what I heard.
Gorillas no, it's cool. So they only eat vegetation, right? And like we're always told, like you need whey and meat, and it's interesting. I don't know all the answers of how it works or how it happens. Obviously, they have massive amounts of testosterone, and that's part of the equation. They probably have very low insulin levels because they're eating vegetation all the time. So that's part of it. But going back to that point, a lion only eats how often? And it gorges. And so a lion, going back to like the cheetah being slow on keto, the lion seems to do pretty well with muscle on fasting. So,
But what's he doing when he's not hunting? Sleeping.
Yes, sleeping.
Chilling all day.
Sleeping.
Kind of getting it on sometimes, but that's about it.
Valuable point. And
Sleeping
hormones.
right?
And
This
hormones.
podcast just took a turn for the
Yeah,
worse.
but I mean, it's the truth, though. You gotta look at the activity.
Well, it was the hand gesture over here that made it worse.
Yeah. And the same thing. We're insane.
And
Because apparently
hormones.
lion paws coming up from the back.
You see this?
My daughter's gonna watch this someday when she
Anyway.
grows up. And she's gonna be like, your daddy's a scumbag. Oh my god.
Discovery Channel, get your way
Song for that.
Yes,
Do it like they do on the Discovery Channel.
not anymore, unless you mean, that's the honey boo boo.
So hormones is definitely a factor with gorillas and lions, but it's all interesting. Like again, like to not get that box too small. Step back outside, look at the animal kingdom, and maybe we can start looking at some more studies.
So definitely got to wrap this up. I know we got to get out of here.
Gets people like,
Stay tuned.
Yeah, definitely going to start doing some more of these. Worst case, we'll just fly to Tampa and make the magic happen, right? Greg will start routing today. He'll eventually get there when we finally get around to it, right? I mean, you got to get around the mountains first, right? So it's all good. Really quickly before we go, the social media, where people can reach you, stuff you're doing, before we wrap up. So we're going to start back around again.
Yeah, well, so Halo.
That's right.
Well, if you know, we're Ketogains on Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, everywhere else.
Follow me on Facebook, Ryan Lowry, and then we do stuff on the Muscle PhD, and we'll talk about that. That's kind of
You're
where
Ryan Plowry on
I'm Ryan P. Lowry on
Ryan Plowry.
Ryan Lowry on Instagram. I don't post much, but I'll interact.
Lowry's all the time.
Lowry.
Lowry's the ladies.
Where's the bear head or the lion?
As you can tell.
Oh my goodness. I'm Zone Halo, ZONEHALO on all the different social networking outlets, and zonehalo.com.
Not to be confused with Halo Top the Ice Cream people, because those people are great. Yes, they do. No. Sean's brilliant. If you're going to make a drug, talk to him, by the way.
Superhero maker.
Superhero maker, literally.
The superhero maker. FitCon Utah's another one. If you want to come check this out next year, we're going to do it a little bit bigger and cap it out. So get on.
We're gonna be here.
Can I say something real quick about this? This event was unbelievable.
Unreal.
This is like getting as big as like the Arnold or the Olympia or something. This event was amazing. We watched pro MMA fights that were ridiculous last night. There's been pro bodybuilders. It's been the show floor with all the businesses here, incredible. Craig, amazing job, and support all his different businesses.
Definitely.
I gotta say, to be honest though, Lucid is sick.
It is sick.
I mean,
it really is sick.
literally, the best nootropic.
And it's expensive.
Yeah,
but it's worth
it.
it.
Yeah.
Again, to your point,
It's worth it.
spend the money on the
Spend
stuff
the
that
money.
makes the difference. Don't waste money.
Hey, look who we got here. Come here.
Drop a knee, flex. We got to see this business.
We got the X-Man in the house.
No, here.
I can't kneel down. Just drop right here by the side, baby.
Well, so the X-Men's coming. The Muscle PhD. The Muscle PhD is basically our social media handle on everything, right?
Yeah.
So, Periscope, Instagram, Facebook.
Celebrity steps.
The
I can't
X-Men.
pass this up.
And the X-Men uses keto.
All day, every day. Well, and speaking
keto
of that,
supplements.
Hold on. I got to blow your mind right quick. I did an interview 48 hours ago about biometrics and aesthetics. Right? One of the things I said that we're going to do, right?
so we just let the
pilot
IBD.
yeah. One of the things I said they always do, normally they do the first call out, the winner, and then the last one, basically everybody else is just standing there. Okay. So I said, we're going to do it like the Sweet 16. So we're going to do elimination so the last man standing is the winner. They just did it tonight for the first time.
What?
Yes. The interview ain't even dry yet. They stole it that quick. Oh my gosh. I was like, because the first call, I was like, these dudes are the worst up here. What's going on? And then they kept getting then I said, I'll be doing it. Oh my God. It's only that. All good, I'm flattered, but I still, it's exactly what I'm saying. I wasn't wrong. This proves the fact that I was actually right. And I'm not trying to be right. I just wanted to be better for everyone. Because if you go to any other event and the the winner comes home, like in other words, the first quarter is basically over. You know what I'm saying? You know who's going to win by just walk out and say no, man. So, wow, it's hilarious. They didn't even wait.
So while we're doing it, where can they reach you? Social media?
TFXman305 is my Instagram, which takes you to my Twitter and Facebook.
Enormous man. And 53, I'm not trying to
I'm 49.5.
49.5.
It's actually 29. He's lying right now.
Yeah.
Can't tell.
Keto's killing his gains, guys.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go ahead and say that right now.
He
He's
lost
trying-
all his gains.
Yeah.
I'm
He
full of
used to be
energy.
3 times this
I
size.
had breakfast today and several doses of keto. Normally I would be like, oh my God, I'm about to die, but I'm good to go. Probably run around the block now.
Several doses of keto means exogenous ketone supplement.
Yes. Oh, y'all didn't tell me what it was yet?
Oh, we talked about it.
we talked about it,
Yeah.
but, you know.
So awesome, guys! Thanks for checking it out. Again, to Dr. Wilson's point, stand around, stick around, pay attention. Going to be more of these in the future.
TheAspie.com.
Yeah, we're starting the Aspie.com, our new lab. And actually, Tony's going to be out there with his son. We're going to turn pro,
Yes.
the next X-Man.
Yes, sir.
Because in bodybuilding, we don't have like that classic physique. We're losing it, you know what I mean? And so Tony's
You're
like the
the same
last
day.
man.
You know, it's funny because
The vacuum
they
pose is gone.
created the classic physique, and I'm like, well, it's going good. I'm like, I was happy. I'm like, okay, cool. Now I can, not compete against the freak show. And then they was like, no, you're too big. You can't do it. I'm like, what the hell? I've been doing it for 25 years. Because I weigh too much? That's insane. Classic physique is a look. It doesn't matter. No one knew that Frank Zane was 178 pounds. You know what I'm saying? So nobody cared. So,
There you go. Cool, guys. Thank you for your time.
There's an ending for you.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks for